Hi, how are you? I hope you're doing well today. I'm still studying Saltines. So today makes my 10th week for communion. And if you have not watched the other ones, I'm going to encourage you to go back and to look, because there's been 4 already. And the one right before that I did to kind of set that up was rumination. So if you'll go back and look at those, then you can get some individual lessons. One lesson is not contingent upon another, though, so you don't have to watch them in a particular order. Rumination is one of those things that, because of our present world today and our present time, I think it's really good to remember before you start your Lord's Supper, or before you do your communion, however you want to phrase it, so that you can understand that we need to be meditating on what is what? Pure, noble, lovely, right, just, of good report, excellent, virtuous, and praiseworthy, versus ruminating on the negative, which is where media and the world has us, okay? And it's affecting so many things. Today I want to talk about God's perfect timing. And you may wonder, what in the world does that have to do with saltine crackers and communion? But it does. So let's go back to originally when the Hebrews were in the land of Goshen, okay, and they are under captivity of Egypt, and they had so many things against them. Moses had been called, and we were talking about the 10 plagues, right? And we're talking about all the things that happened. And then we're talking about the very last plague before Pharaoh finally said, get out, because he just could not stand. It was the plague of the firstborn. So including his firstborn son, but every firstborn, including animals, had been killed by the destroyer angel, which of course you remember that the Hebrews came inside and they put the blood on the lintel and the doorposts. So this is a complete aside. They dipped their hyssop branch into the blood, and they were to strike the lintel and the doorposts. Guess what sign they were making with the blood? And the hyssop is there. Yes, they were making the sign of the cross, and they didn't even realize it. They didn't take it and smear it like that. So you're missing a lot of significance if you're looking at that. But then what did they do? The Lord said to get up and go. Okay, so their bread had not had time to rise. And so that's where we get the cracker. It has no leaven. And of course, leaven now, or yeast, represents sin. But it had no leaven. It had no leaven. Okay, so wait. So they took the doorposts and the lintel like this. They had been covered in blood. And then their bread had no leaven. Those are not coincidental. Do you see that? That's not a coincidence. So their bread didn't have time to rise, but they didn't have sin. They didn't have sin. I covered this just a smidge earlier, but I didn't get to that main point. That when they were covered in the blood, a spotless, perfect lamb, right? When they were covered in that, they had no sin. It was God's perfect timing. God saved them in the nick of time, if you will. But God knew what time it was all along. And then what happened? The Egyptians freely gave them everything that they would need. Gave them of their own possessions, gave them of their own cattle, their own livestock, the silver, the gold. They gave them everything they would need in order to make a journey. Okay. So the Israelites went from being slavery to being covered by the blood. And right after that, they were provided for and looked at with no sin. Okay. Guys, you are the righteousness of God in Christ Jesus. You have no sin. You have no blemish. Yes, I know. You may have said something terrible just 10 seconds before you watched this. You are covered in the blood. And God will provide for you. That was part of that covenant meal. When we come together and celebrate communion, what we lack, he has. In our weakness, he is strong. When we are sin, when we have been covered in sin, we're sin within us, he made atonement for that, but he actually wiped it all clean. When you're doing your communion this morning, think about the Israelites passage and understand that when you're covered in the blood and that you have no sin in you when you're looking at your cracker. Blessings.